DC action figure fans. Scott Toy Guru Neitlich here with another installment of the director's commentary for Mattel's amazing DC Universe Classics action figure line that ran from 2008 through 2013, 2014. I had the absolute privilege of being the brand manager for the bulk of the line, the first 19 waves, plus some Green Lantern waves and some Public Enemies waves and some exclusives and Comic-Con items. So this series we're going wave by wave, exclusive by exclusive, and we're now up to wave 11. So let's deep dive and talk about DCU Classics Wave 11. So this wave, while it wasn't, I guess, intentional, it kind of definitely became a Green Lantern wave, with leading John Stewart as kind of the A-list character. Every wave sort of had one main character that the wave was kind of built around, but it was never the intention to really have like a straight wave of one theme. But I think of all the waves, except from, the Blackest Night, Brightest Day wave aside, which ironically is also kind of a Green Lantern-y wave, although with main characters, Wave 11 was probably the one that was most kind of themed under one kind of family of characters. So, besides John Stewart, you had Katma, who was probably the most well-known female Green Lantern, but there were definitely, non-Green Lantern characters too. We had, Deadman, who is kind of a classic 1970s, 1980s character. Had, pretty original backstory, being a guy who comes back from the dead to solve his own murder, and then can possess other heroes. And I don't know, he's a ghost. He's neat. It's always cool when you have ghost figures. And such a Bill Beneke variant. Bill Beneke, the genius designer who I was fortunate enough to work with, found some really innovative ways of creating variants. And in this case, Deadman had a phasing version where the tips of his limbs, his feet, legs, arms, hands were clear and phased into the plastic. Looked like a ghost. And of course, our token Kirby Superpowers figure, in this case, Steppenwolf. And much like some of the previous Superpowers Kirby figures, Steppenwolf had a variant that was kind of the other version, the Superpowers version, as opposed to the classic Kirby version. And we were big Kirby fans, and we were big Superpowers fans. And Bill and I and the Horsemen were deliberately trying to recreate the Superpowers line in DCU Classics. Returning to the world of Green Lantern, we had an update of the Sinestro version, the Sinestro Corps version of Hank as the Cyborg Superman. And check out that bubble detail with the Sinestro Corps seal there. That was I think it was Jason Langston who came up with those kind of things, adding detail to the bubbles. We had people really passionate working on this line, the whole team. Shark, another Green Lantern figure. Yeah, like I said, we actually tried to avoid theming the waves for one character. That was actually the original intent for the line, was every wave was going to be themed for kind of one family. And then we realized that, well, no, then if you get someone who doesn't like Green Lantern, they won't buy any of the figures. This wave also included the first Fan's Choice figure, which was the Question. You can see the video link here of I did just about how the Fan's Choice process worked. And of course, it wouldn't be a Green Lantern wave if it wasn't building up to a Green Lantern Build-A-Figure, Collect and Connect figure, TM and trademark, which was Kilowog. And I think one of the better, if not best, Collect and Connects that we did. He just came out awesome, and I think appropriately scaled. So that was the full wave. Yes, a little heavy on the Green Lantern, but not entirely. You had Question in there, and Deadman, and Steppenwolf. Hey, I'm trying here. All right, let's dive in and go figure by figure. So our lead figure, John Stewart, he is kind of the second Green Lantern, maybe not Guy Gardner and Kyle aside. He was, I think, Hal's first replacement when they needed a backup Green Lantern for our space sector. And we looked at different versions of him through the years. In the 70s he had a bit more of an afro, and then in the 90s a bit more of a crew cut, and even in the animated series he was bald for a little while with a goatee. And he's definitely your A-list, if not B-list, character from the DC universe. especially because, as I said, he was in the animated series, the Justice League Unlimited, not only as a founding member of the team, but he went on throughout Justice League Unlimited to have like major story arcs. So he was well known by the public. And he had some redesigns throughout the years, but we definitely went with his classic version, minus maybe the afro. So, cool to add him. Plus he gave us some great new constructs that we were able to tool up. And then pairing him up with his occasional love interest, Katma is from the same species as Sinestro, but she's a good guy, at least a Green Lantern, and probably, arguably the most popular or well-known female Green Lantern. She came with the biggest chunk of Kilowog there, because usually the smallest figure came with the biggest chunk. Her being a female, she was slightly smaller than males, and she had 2 accessories. Again, it was great. We got to tool up 2 more Green Lantern constructs, although the sword only fit on her hand as a female, so we weren't really able to reuse that again, which is kind of a shame because we had a lot of Green Lantern stuff, especially with the movie, and it's always great when you can reuse tooling. We came up with some interesting things to redeco or recast as constructs throughout the years. But hers were original. She had a sword and a shield, and they plugged right onto her arm, kind of over her ring. Again, looking at all the different versions of her over the years. Sometimes she's got long hair, sometimes she's got short hair, sometimes she's in skimpier outfits. But we went with, I think the Horsemen actually were the ones who sort of chose, which look, and really went with kind of the classic version of her in a classic Green Lantern outfit. So that way, when all the lanterns are together, they were definitely wearing similar outfits and weren't too different, as opposed to doing her in an outfit like this that really stands out, although it's probably a little bit sexier, but, hey, sometimes you want to have continuity as opposed to sexy with your action figures, right? Yeah, I know. Every time I call an action figure sexy, my wife rolls her eyes at me. All right, so next up, and taking a quick left from Green Lantern world, is Deadman. As I mentioned kind of at the beginning, he's quite a unique character for the DC universe. That he's a ghost who came back to avenge his own murder, and he has the superpower to possess, well, really anyone, and sometimes possesses superheroes and supervillains and makes them do his bidding. He was used really cleverly, I think, in the Justice League Unlimited show. I know I keep coming back to that, but you have to kind of realize that was just going off the air when DC Universe Classics was hitting, so the show was not only first of mind with Bill, the Horseman, myself, people at DC and Mattel, but also with the fans too. A lot of people, that show was the introduction to a much larger DC universe for the public, much as the way in the 80s Superpowers, the toy line, introduced them. So with both the show and the Justice League action figure line literally, kind of like right behind us, outside in our rear view mirror, it definitely was a big influence on character selection and, who we were going to do. And I mentioned earlier in the video, the way, Bill Beneke tackled doing a variant for Deadman where he had the factory cast the limbs in see-through translucent plastic and then didn't paint the tips. So that here you had your regular version of Deadman. Oh, who I should also mention gave us our skinny buck. I think this is the very first time we used the skinny buck, and he gave that to us. So, yeah, that's another big thing is when you're creating figures. So this was 2 variants. So the full color and the see-through translucent phasing version. And yeah, hats off to Bill for creating this. And yes, now we have a skinny buck. So now we could do other skinny characters. And this, this was definitely the progress of the line as we got more and more bucks, starting with, the basic male buck, and then the beefed up male buck, and the female buck, and the teenage bucks. Bucks meaning a generic body for action figures that can be used over and over again. And yeah, unless I'm mistaken, this was our very first sort of super skinny character. And, so he was almost fully tooled, but we knew he was an investment in future skinny figures. So, hey, a great figure to give us that skinny buck, Deadman. He was awesome. Okay, next up, a sort of a return to Green Lantern universe was Cyborg Superman. And a lot of you will say, wait a minute, you already did Cyborg Superman, and twice even. Yes, that's right, we did. Hank as Cyborg Superman from the Reign of the Superman series in the 90s, which was actually my very first DC comic book, was the Reign of the Superman line, or a series. He was recast as a villain in the Sinestro Corps War, as from a Superman villain to a Green Lantern villain, and he got a new costume that had the Sinestro Corps symbol on it. Now, we had already tooled and created Cyborg Superman in the DC Superheroes line that predated DC Universe Classics, and he was pretty much a fully tooled figure. Well, I guess his arms and legs were reused, but the chest and the head were all new, and the cyborg arm was all new. So, okay, so partially tooled. So we already had this tool in our bank, and since he had not only was repurposed, but as a Green Lantern villain in the Sinestro Corps War, but he kind of got a new lease on life in the comic books. Even though we had just re-released the traditional version of him in a 2-pack with Mongol, it seemed like a good idea to get him out in his new colors. And we did put some tooling behind him. We tooled up a new hand, so his left hand with multiple Sinestro Corps rings on it there, which you can see in this image. So he did get, a new part, but he was otherwise a redeco. But he's one of those kind of, worked as a redeco because it was a very different look. And, he didn't have this look when he was originally tooled. So it was a good chance to revisit a tool we already had. An interesting side note about the character is he was also released as a 12-inch figure in the Giants series that was exclusive to Toys R Us. So we had that tool as well, and we did investigate doing the Sinestro Corps version of him at this scale, which you can see here. He was never released, but he was done in pre-production. I actually am lucky enough to have the sample. He's on my top shelf next to my Marshmallow Man and my 12-inch Darth Vader from Sideshow. But here you can see him, so it's, again, just a redeco. He didn't get the rings. We didn't retool the hand like we did with 6-inch, but he was cool. All right, so next up, similar to the Parademons, that when we did them a few waves ago, we did 2 completely different versions of the Parademon. We were going to tackle that with Steppenwolf. Now, way before Steppenwolf looked like this, he looked like this. This was the way Jack Kirby originally created him as a villain in the Fourth World New God series. And we've covered this before, what big Fourth World Kirby fans we all were, but more so Superpowers fans. We really deliberately wanted to recreate the vintage Kenner Superpowers line in 6-inch form. So when we did Steppenwolf, it made sense to do the Superpowers version, but much like the previously mentioned Parademons, to also do the Jack Kirby, the original version, before he was redesigned for Kenner and for Jack Kirby's Superpowers comic book that he did, which is actually the only comic he ever got royalties on. I may have mentioned that before, but yeah, there's your history note about Jack Kirby. So 2 different sculpts, both using the main male Buck. Here are with Bucks again, with some add-on parts. Some new features, some new boots, new gloves, that kind of thing, new weapon, new head. But both basically partial tool figures, and we were able to take this vintage Superpowers figure and recreate it as a 6-inch figure, which I think is the first time and only time that's ever been done for this particular version. And of course, for those of you who are fans of the classic version of Steppenwolf in the green and yellow, you can have him with his horn and his swords. And he came out great too. I actually like both of these versions. It's one of those characters where the looks are so different. You saw the classic version again showing up on the animated series and Superman and Justice League. So that Bruce Timm show really having a huge influence on characters, since it was, again, right in our rear view mirror, having just ended and been worked on not only by Mattel, but really embraced by the fans as an introduction to the wider DC universe. So Steppenwolf and Steppenwolf as a 50-50 variant there. All right, next up in Wave 11 is our fan choice winner, The Question. Definitely one of my favorite figures in the entire line. He's so simple. He doesn't even have a face, but of course he shouldn't have a face. That's what he looks like. Now, the other characters in the fan choice included characters like Huntress, and we had Ragman, and we had Catman as a candidate, as well as Cheetah, who was the only one who never got made in that, at least that version, and then Starman. All the others except Cheetah eventually got made. So question 1, the fan vote. You can see a link if you want to see more about the fan vote and how that worked. I did a whole video on that. And definitely think a big reason he won was, again, because of Justice League Unlimited. He was arguably the star of the first season of Justice League Unlimited, or maybe the second season. I mean, he was a real breakout character. Even Bruce Timm in the commentary talked about that, how kind of once they started doing question episodes, they realized, we can't stop. He's just too good. He really, like the Big Lebowski rug, he drew the whole show together. So, I think his popularity on the show, combined with the fact that we didn't have access to him in the Justice League Unlimited retail line at first, had a lot of pent-up demand for this character and probably led to him winning. Now, it's interesting, the kind of the traditional look is actually him in his brown coat, as opposed to a blue trench coat. And we use the existing suit body from Clark Kent. And even the Horseman image that they drew for the fan contest, which we actually couldn't use, but you see it here, had him in the brown coat. But we went with the blue coat. I don't remember discussions happening, but that's kind of just what happened. I think the Horseman finally made that call when they did their Paint Master. And yeah, I mean, pretty much looks like he stepped right out of the animated series. So I think that, the inability to do him in the animated series for so many years, eventually we got access, but I think that led to him winning the fan vote in 6-inch. Or maybe not. Maybe people just liked him. All right. Let's see. Rounding out, now we go back to the Green Lantern world for Shark, who was a Silver Age Green Lantern villain, and it's kind of a sort of, a mixed match of modern take on his Silver Age outfit. Definitely very, very classic version of Shark. And again, as I kind of mentioned in the very beginning of this video, the original lineup when we worked out DC Universe Classics was each wave was going to be themed for kind of one family. A Batman wave, a Green Lantern wave, a Wonder Woman wave, a New Gods wave. But it was definitely decided that if we did it that way, then people who were, Green Lantern fans wouldn't buy the Wonder Woman wave, and people who were Batman fans wouldn't buy the Flash wave. So we wanted to really make sure every wave kind of had a variety of characters. And I think this wave violates that rule the most because it has the most characters from one family. Now, Mattel did eventually do another version of another Shark character as a Build-A-Figure, Collect and Connect, trademark, copyright. This was after I left Mattel in the Multiverse line. Also a very cool character. Arguably, I think, a cooler Shark action figure than Shark from Wave 11, but, very different in the DC Universe. All right, rounding out our Wave 11 was our Build-A-Figure, Kilowog, the head poozer himself. Kilowog has had I wouldn't say a lot of looks over the years, but he tends to get drawn a little differently by different artists, especially his face. His body is pretty standard. He has what I would call the Hulk body, but his face tends to, he's got like that pink pig thing going, but it tends to differ a little bit. So the Horseman had to really kind of look at what the quintessential version of Kilowog was going to be. But much like Deadman, Kilowog here was going to give us a figure buck that we got to use over and over again, and namely, I called it the Hulk buck. I suppose you would call it the Kilowog buck, but I think in the industry it tends to be called the Hulk buck, basically your giant, oversized, made of muscle character. We've done several Kilowogs over the years. Some came after this version, some of the movie characters that came after. There were some that came before, this super skinny JLU figure that I was never really happy with. And for me personally, doing this Kilowog was definitely redemption after that JLU Kilowog that just did not work in my mind because he was just way too skinny. He was used on the regular JLU body, but Kilowog's a big guy, and I think he's perfectly in scale here. And as I mentioned, there we go. There's the Hulk buck. We got to reuse it over and over again for different buffed up characters. So Kilowog was great because this wave gave us skinny body and Hulk body. So hey, we're getting those bucks. We're racking them up, and he's awesome. Kilowog is one of my favorite Build-A-Figures. I think right there was Solomon Grundy and Chemo. He came out great. To me, I think he's the right scale. Maybe some people argue he's not, but he looks like classic Kilowog in my mind, and it's a great wave, especially if you like Green Lantern characters. And if you don't like Green Lantern characters, we promise no more in the next wave. But this was a great wave. A lot of green, even in the non-Green Lantern figures with Steppenwolf there front and center. All right, see you next time.